Sure. So yeah, I was just asking if you all can tell me and share your thoughts what Agile means to you whenever you heard the term Agile in your work or generally elsewhere. What is that key thing that comes to your mind when that terminology comes into you? Go ahead and feel free to share in the chat window. Smaller projects that all come together to make the full scope realized. Thank you, Ben. I mean, feel free to share your perspectives. Let's keep this as interactive as possible. And there's no wrong answers. It's all like our different perspectives and thoughts. So feel free to share your thoughts. Agile to me is very adaptive and learning continuously. Thank you, Deep. And Casey says Agile is adopting the solution to the get full result. Awesome. Any more thoughts? Any more ideas about what Agile could be? All right, so let's begin. It's pretty much what you all shared, and it's just a little bit more than what we could think from an Agile mindset perspective, right? So I always say this to my customers as well. So Agile is not merely a methodology, it's actually a mindset. It's a culture that we implement across the company. It's I would call it more like a complete mind shift from the traditional way we had been delivering products all along, right? So when I say Agile as a mindset, there are a few key things that I would like to touch upon here. So it's a mindset wherein we welcome different perspectives and diversity of thoughts and ideas. Like in this room today, in every project of ours, we have different skill set, people with different expertise in the same room. They all come with a variety of experience and perspective, right? So Agile mindset, the first and foremost thing is we're all okay and we're all welcoming different perspectives and diversity of thoughts and ideas so we can together improve and grow as a team, including all the learnings and ideas that we have. It also means that we learn from our past mistakes and improve, because like we all make mistakes in every project. We're never perfect. We always make mistakes, and it does happen. We just need to ensure that we're always continuously learning and we're improving as a team. It also means that we learn to accept changes and adapt quickly, because change is the only constant, and it's no better time than to talk about it now during the COVID times. Over the last 2 years, everything is changing. The way the businesses are doing work has changed. The way the company is doing business has changed. Their sales process changed. The way we communicate has changed. Even these meetings, which we had been doing in person, has become virtual. So like everything has changed. So to be successful, the sooner we accept changes and adapt quickly, the faster we are in that path. The Agile mindset also means like our teams are transparent. So whether it's success or failures, we're all transparent. We're all open to each other when we share our thoughts, and we're all self-managing. So nobody is dictating to us like, hey, you do this work or you do that work. We are a self-managing team. We are well aware of our expertise. We're well aware of the skill set that we have and what we have in the table in terms of that product goal. And we try to pick all that in, and we manage ourselves instead of someone coming and telling us like, hey, you have to pick this task today, or you have to pick this work today, right? And the Agile mindset also means that our teams continuously communicate, collaborate, and share knowledge freely. So there's always knowledge sharing that's there. We have a rich amount of knowledge together as a team based on our different skill set and expertise. And it also very, very important to ensure the teams are happy and having fun, because end of the day, every day morning when we get up, we want to look forward to go to work and work as a team. So it's very, very important that the teams are happy and having fun. And finally, the work pace, the pace at which we do work every day is sustainable. None of us are either overworked or like underworked, but the work pace is kind of sustainable for all of us, right? So this being the Agile mindset. So what happens if we have the Agile mindset? So with these, we are able to deliver high business value incrementally, sooner and faster, with high quality and a safer delivery, right? So when I say safer delivery, what I mean here is like a smooth delivery without bigger shocks in production, because none of us like to see bigger shocks in production, whether we are from the IT side or from the business side. We really like things to be smooth, right? And we're also able to innovate as we progress and deliver satisfactory products, utilizing the consistent feedbacks. Because in majority of cases, we never know everything upfront. Things are constantly changing and we want to innovate. We want to incorporate our learnings and feedbacks and just make the product better and better. So all this is possible because we have adopted to the Agile as a mindset, right? It's also very important that through this process, like I mentioned, the teams are happy and eventually customers will be happy because everything is going right. So I just wanted to talk about Waterfall versus Agile a bit, because when we are talking about Agile and Scrum, it doesn't mean that because every competitor of yours is being Agile, you should be Agile, or Agile is the buzzword, so let's all go and jump and be Agile, right? It's not that. There are a few parameters we need to consider and decide which suits our need better, simply because there is no one size fits all. So what might fit my need might not fit yours. So the traditional waterfall methodology can still be a fit for some of the programs depending on their parameters. So it's totally wrong to say only Agile works or only Waterfall works. We need to make that assessment to ensure what really would work for us. So I'm going to take a non-IT example, a pretty traditional, like let's pick up a house example, right? Say we are renovating a kitchen. And let's see, when do we adopt Waterfall and when do we take the Agile path, and what happens when we do either of the options, right? So say I exactly know which appliances I need for my kitchen, like what brand, the dimensions, the pattern, and everything, right? And I've already decided the colors of my cabinet, my cooktop, my shelves, my wall. And say my budget is also fixed when I'm planning to renovate my kitchen. Now the work itself has become very predictable and the outcome is already known because I'm very clear that exact brands and dimensions and colors and everything that I need for my kitchen to be renovated. And of course my budget is fixed. So, everything is predictable and the outcome is already known. And say I'm giving a call to my renovation company and I receive an estimate from them that it takes 3 months to complete what I want. And they say that I can't access my kitchen for 3 months. And I'm actually fine with it because my family lives just a couple blocks away. It's just that I need to manage my timing to pick my food from my mom. So it works for me in my life. So, I'm fine with waiting for 3 months. So this typically fits very well with the waterfall, right? So because it operates in phases. If we come back to our IT projects, you would have seen that, in waterfall projects, you have like different phases like requirements, design, implementation, you have a verification and deployment and maintenance, right? So what happens technically in waterfall is the requirements get logged at the end of requirements phase, design at the end of design phase, and so on, right? So changes to them cannot be incorporated that easily because once you're signed off, you're not able to incorporate changes immediately because it's signed off, that phase is gone over. And we have to wait for the change management cycle for that to happen. So there's a very limited room here for innovation and feedback, right? So like say 3 months has passed by and the best case scenario is because I already know exactly what I wanted. I have everything that I look for and I'm pretty happy with the way my kitchen renovation turned out, right? That's the very much happy path because I was very clear. But there is something else that can happen too if I'm not happy. Like, for example, I'm not happy with an appliance or I'm not happy with the color of my wall. I don't like the wallpaper whatsoever, right? It's very hard to change and they're going to charge me like extra budget and extra time to incorporate all that changes, which means I'm not being able to use my kitchen for some more time, right? So all this needs to be kept aside and it might leave me a little disappointed, right? But however, this is the worst case scenario. The best case scenario is because I knew everything upfront, I'm going to be pretty happy with the way my kitchen turned out. So waterfall works like a charm for me in this scenario, right? So when do we go with renovating kitchen in the agile way? Say I want to renovate the kitchen iteratively. I do not wish to wait for 3 months and I want to start using it as soon as a part of it is built, right? And I have my MVP very clear. And I also want to provide consistent feedback and incorporate whatever I'm seeing. So as I see, I want to make changes or add more color to it or add a different wallpaper to it. I want to just be innovative as possible as things are getting built. For instance, let's say I want my cooktop and chimney to be ready first so that I can start cooking. And then I want my refrigerators so I can just store my ice creams and vegetables and milk. And next critical item for me is my sink and my slab, followed by my cabinet and my shelves. So here, if you look at it, my MVP is like very clear. So while I start cooking and I notice that I may need a longer slab, I can always incorporate it, right? And if I feel like I would love a nice wallpaper, which will make my kitchen look more beautiful, I can always ask my designer to add it to the list of items, right? So through Agile, what's happening is we can accommodate new ideas and learnings, which will certainly make me very happy with the end results. And don't forget, I get to use my kitchen through this process as and when an item is ready. I don't have to wait for the full complete.
For the computer, okay.
So let's move on a little bit into the Scrum side, right? So there's a variety of different approaches or frameworks based on the Agile values and principles set out in the Agile Manifesto. So you would have heard about Scrum, you would have heard about extreme programming, you would have heard about crystal methods, SAFe, and so on, right? So again, there is no one size fits all, very similar to how we picked Agile and Waterfall. We need to look at different parameters, and then we have to choose which framework is the best fit for us. However, we are not covering all of these different frameworks in the session today. We will pretty much focus on primarily the most successful and widely used framework, which is Scrum. We are going to only talk through Scrum through the remainder of the session today. So I just want to give you a little bit background about how Scrum came into existence and what were the core values and principles behind it, because this is like a foundation for us to understand the reasoning behind everything that we do as part of the Scrum framework. So Scrum was actually founded on two things, empiricism and lean thinking. What empiricism means is like, we believe that knowledge comes from experience and we make decisions based on what is observed, right? And it's again, our experience, not totally someone else's experience, because our experience is our experience. We're going to pick that and pick the knowledge from that. And then we are going to keep making improvements and make decisions based on what we are observing. And what lean thinking means is it's to eliminate waste and focus on what is important. So anything that is of no value or zero importance, we won't even focus about it. We're only going to channelize all our energy and effort on what's important, right? So Scrum is a lightweight framework. So it helps people, teams, organizations generate value through adaptive solutions for a lot of complex problems. That's one of its real success factors, right? And it also employs an iterative incremental approach to optimize the predictability and also controls risks. So it emphasizes on a few things. One is transparency in communication. So like I mentioned earlier, even in the Agile mindset, it's one of the very critical things that, there is always a trust in the team. We all trust each other, we all respect each other, and we're also very transparent with each other. So whether we have successes or failures, we're not hesitant. We just are open to sharing with each other so that we can, continue to grow as a team and learn from each other's experiences, right? And it also means that we are creating an environment of collective accountability and continuous progress through Scrum. So Scrum actually engages a group of people who collectively have all skills and expertise to do the work and share or acquire such skills. So you would be having, in your Scrum team, you would always see there are different skill set, you could have people with architecture skill set or a design skill set or an UI UX skill set, or it could be pure configuration or coding skill set, right? You have multiple different skill sets. So you have different skill sets for you to make your product successful or your product goal to be achieved, right? And we're all willing to, again, share knowledge with each other because our experiences or expertise comes into the strength of the team. So there are three pillars of Scrum, which is transparency, inspection, and adaptation. And again, this is like very core for Scrum, right? So you will keep seeing the flavor of it as we talk through different elements of Scrum. And typically the success of Scrum depends on the people becoming more proficient in their living its 5 values. So one is commitment. It's the commitment to achieve goals and support each other, like as a team. And the second is focus, the focus on the work of the sprint to make the best possible progress. And the third is openness. So when I say openness, it's about we are open about our work, we are open about our challenges. It circles back to our transparency with success and failures. And then the fourth one is respect. So like I said, it's again a core thing that we trust and respect each other. So we are able to do everything else. The communication and collaboration becomes much easier. The final value is the courage. It's the courage to do the right thing and work on tough problems. So moving on, I would like to hear from you all. So whom do you think are part of the Scrum team? What do you think are the different roles that are included as part of your Scrum team or Scrum squad? Can you go ahead and say what you feel in the chat? Feel free to let me know in the chat. What do you think the Scrum team comprises of? What roles, or what do you think, or what are they called in your Scrum team? Typically, when you work on Scrum engagements, Salesforce engagements that follow Scrum. So what are the roles that you generally see? Developers, testers, quality analysts, Scrum Master. Thank you, Harsh. Ankit says program manager. Thank you, Ankit. Scrum Master, product owner, project manager, developers, business analysts, QA. Awesome. Yep, you all pretty much covered it. So I'm going to just summarize what I think are part of Scrum Squad, and these are the Scrum Squad, right? So I'm an Avengers fan, so you will see Avengers character here. The first and foremost is a product owner, right? So the product owner is the person who's responsible for the product backlog and prioritization. So when I say product backlog, I just want to take a step back and talk a little bit about the product backlog and what a product backlog item is, right? So whenever we are starting on a project, we hear about the vision of the project from the customers or the stakeholders. They tell that, okay, this is why I'm doing this. This is why I'm having a digital transformation journey, or this is what I'm looking to get to. And then we also, as we discuss, we gather their goal, right? Their product goal. So why are they even implementing Salesforce? What is that they want to have? Like, for example, if I'm talking to a customer and they tell me like, hey, Sudha, I'm looking to have a customer service optimization in my company, and that's why I think it's important for me to get into this digital journey. I'm like, wow, that's excellent, because that is the core thing that we are trying to achieve here. And that gets into my product backlog, probably as my epic, which is like your highest level of requirement, let's call it, right? The highest goal that we need to achieve. And then I'm trying to talk to my customer. And then as I have a conversation, I keep asking like, okay, I understand you want to do customer service optimization, but what are the key challenges that you're facing? What is it that you're struggling with? And say, for example, my customer tells me like, you know what, Sudha, there are a few things I struggle with. The first and foremost, my call center agents don't have like a single place where they can go and log their service request. I don't have a case escalation in place. My SLA is all a mess. I am trying to see if I can bring all this into one system and have a very channelized process. But I'm also looking for a few other things, like I want to have Slack. I hear Slack is the new thing and it'd be very good for your collaboration and communication. So if you can tell me more about it, I'm looking to have like a communication or a collaboration platform. And I also want to have some knowledge base created with FAQs and everything recorded. So now I'm like, if I'm the product owner, I have a bit more information than just knowing that it's customer service optimization, right? So all these different elements that the customer told me, I'm going to log them as features in my product backlog, right? Because now I know a little bit more deeper dive of what is required, like case management is required, building knowledge base is required, a collaboration platform is required. So each of these will get into as features. And then what I would do is, okay, you told me all these are important, like which is the most important one? Where do you even want to get started? And if the customer tells me it's the call center and the case management piece, then I'll start having more conversations to understand what is it that we can do, right? We need to build a page for cases. We need to put a bunch of fields. We need to understand what's the business process behind the case flow itself. Like, how does the service request flow? What are the different stages it gets into? What are the SLAs? So each of these will become my user stories. So together, all these are called as the product backlog item. So anytime when I say product backlog or product backlog item, I'm talking about all these different stories and features and epics we have for achieving the vision and goal for the customer, right? So the product owner is the primary person and responsible for the product backlog and also prioritizing the product backlog. And also the product owner ensures the team who is going to be working on the project, developing it or testing it, whatever, right? So we all understand the product backlog item. So we all know why even do we have this user story? What is the goal? What is the big picture? What are we supposed to achieve through this particular story? So that's, again, the responsibility of the product owner to ensure everyone understands what's the product backlog item. So obviously, product owner is responsible then for maximizing the value of the product, right? The ROI itself. So the second one, which you would hear, is the Scrum Master. Like Nick Fury, it's going to be the true leader, right? Scrum Master serves Scrum team and the larger organization and always ensures Scrum is adopted well. So the Scrum Master is your go-to person if you're not sure if you're doing the right thing from a process perspective, or if you're stuck with your tool like Jira or whatever tool you're using to manage projects. If you're not sure how to do something, how a user story should be transitioned, or anything with process, right? He or she is your go-to person for any of such questions around Scrum. So the Scrum Master is also your Scrum coach or a mentor. Some companies, some organizations have an Agile coach who will take care of the coaching, but immediately for your team, you need to go to the Scrum Master for any mentoring or coaching around the processes. The Scrum Master also facilitates all the Scrum events or ceremonies, as we call, like your backlog grooming or sprint planning or your daily stand-ups and all that. Scrum Master's primary responsibility is also to facilitate and ensure we have the right audience and the right content for each of these meetings. Also, Scrum Master is the person who is responsible for removing the impediments for delivering your committed product. So if you have any risk, you feel there's any blocking thing for you or any impediments, right? The Scrum Master is your go-to person. And I highly recommend, don't even wait for your daily stand-up or daily scrums. Just go and let your Scrum Master know as soon as you found there's an impediment. Just don't wait for any ceremonies to happen. Finally is like the other full Avengers team, it's the developers, right? So the developers are the primary responsibility for them would be to deliver the potentially shippable increments of done products at end of each sprint. So we have this overall common goal, which is your product goal, like for example, customer service optimization. That's my overall goal. But there are also individual sprint goals, right? Because we can't achieve a huge volume of product backlog item in just one sprint. So we have multiple sprints. We're going to build things iteratively and incrementally. So we need to ensure the developers are responsible for, delivering these potential shippable items at end of each sprint. And like I said, the team is self-managing, which means they choose who, how, and what to work on. So unlike Waterfall, you're not assigning work to anybody. You're not saying, hey, Sudha, you need to work on this story, or Sheba needs to work on this story. Sudha, Sheba, if they're part of the dev team, they will decide for themselves based on their skill set and expertise, which will be the most apt work for them to make it more successful and faster. Also, like I said, it's more cross-functional team. So don't go by the word developers means config or coding. It's imagine the terminology to relate to product development, right? For me to ensure the product goal is fully developed and delivered, who are all the different people I need, right? So developers could be people with skill set of configuration, coding, architecture, design, UI, UX, integration, and whatnot. Whatever skill set you need for a successful delivery of a product, those skill set and the people with those skill sets are part of your developers. So in a nutshell, like I said, a Scrum team comprises of a product owner, Scrum Master, and developers. They're typically a team of 10 or fewer, and they together work towards the common product goal. So I just want to spend a few minutes talking through the Scrum framework itself, so it's easy for us to understand what the different Scrum ceremonies are, what do we do in each of these ceremonies. I wouldn't take too much time on this framework. It's definitely, I would recommend you all to go and read up. I also have a blog in Salesforce couple if you want to learn more about these Scrum ceremonies. But I'm just going to give an overview of how each of these ceremonies will work. So like I mentioned, the first and foremost thing is for the product owner to talk to the executive team or stakeholders, customers or users, whomever is your business stakeholder, right? You try to talk to them to understand the vision and the goal and try to translate them into your product backlog as product backlog items. And this commitment for you is the product goal. What you're trying to achieve is to achieve the product goal. And you would be grooming all these stories with your team so that everybody understands what's the goal, what each user story translates to, what's that they need to work on. And they might definitely have a lot of questions for you. Product owner's responsibility is to answer all of them. If the product owner doesn't have the answers, they have to go to the stakeholders to understand more details and come and give the team the necessary details. And during the backlog refinement, so your team understands your stories fully, and after they understand the story fully, they try to estimate the stories with story points, right? So before I move on to the other Scrum ceremonies, you will keep hearing this word sprints in every other ceremony I'm going to talk through, like a sprint planning or a sprint review or a sprint retrospective. So what are the sprints itself, right? So sprints are the heartbeat of Scrum. So ideas are turned into value during this time, right? It's a time-boxed iteration of a continuous development cycle. So they're usually 1 to 4 weeks, and end of each sprint, an increment or multiple increments are created. So when I say increment, what I mean here is these are your done products, which are your potential shippable items, right? You do a set of user stories, and if they are done as part of the sprint, that's delivered and you're moving on to the next sprint. So yes, so this is what a sprint ideally means. So anytime you hear sprint, this is the relation that we need to have. So let's moving on to the sprint planning as a ceremony, right? The sprint planning initiates the sprint by laying out the work to be performed for the sprint. So this plan is created by collaborative work of the entire Scrum team. So it's not just the Scrum Master or just the product owner or the developers. It's the entire Scrum teams who work during the sprint planning, right? We try to address 3 main questions every time we do a sprint planning. The first one is, why is the sprint valuable? Why are we even doing the sprint? What is the sprint goal? What are we even trying to achieve? Say, for example, in the same scenario we took, if we are picking case management as a feature, and in the first sprint, we decided, let's first get a place where we can log all the different attributes for the case. We need to log all the details about that case. Basically, in Salesforce terminology, you're building a page so that your service agents can go and have all the details in there. If that's your sprint goal, we need to know that's the sprint goal. That's why I'm doing the sprint, so that my first step towards doing the case management is taken care of, right? The second question is, what can be done in the sprint? Right? I know I need to do case management, but there are a bunch of user stories. What should I be doing the sprint, right? So basically you have a prioritized list already in your hand, and the developers select items to include in the current sprint. So there are, again, a few things that you look at: how much capacity your team has, how much has been your historical velocity, in the sense that in my first sprint and second sprint, we kind of did 30 story points and 33 story points. So I know that the same team can deliver on an average of say 30 story points every sprint. Then I try to say like, I'll try to keep that as one of my measuring factors. So I would not go and pick anything beyond 30 because historically my team has not achieved more than this. So I don't think it's good to pick more because it's going to overburden the team. Right. And we also look at the capacity. So all of us have a vacation plan, leave plans, there are holidays. All that needs to be considered to know how many hours I have the sprint to do the actual work. So all these are considered during your sprint planning, and that's how you decide how much work can be done for the current sprint. And the third question will be, how will the chosen work get done? Now, good, we know the sprint goal, we know what are the stories that we are going to pick up, and how will we get it done, right? So what we do is something called as a task estimations. So the developers plan the work necessary to create this increment that matches the definition of done, right? So what we do is, say, for example, I'm going to pick a specific Salesforce example here. Say I need to put a bunch of fields in my case page layout, right? I need a case owner, and I have a case status, and I have like a case origin, right? Because I have multiple origin. So if this is what my story is trying to capture, then what I would do is I'll try to break them into multiple tasks, right? And I highly recommend don't do it the waterfall way where you say, development will take half an hour, testing will take half an hour. No, that's not how you do tasks. How we should do tasks is to logically break them down. So for me to put these 3 fields in the page and for someone to access is what all I need to take care of, right? First, I need to ensure the fields are created with the correct data type. Second, I need to ensure it's placed in the right location, right? The right section of the page. Third, I need to ensure the read-only or edit or whatever access that needs to be taken care of, your FLS, all that is taken care of, right? And fourth, if at all, if I have to add some complexity, if these values are coming from some other system, we need to ensure there's some story that's taking care of that integration too, right? So my tasks will be logically broken down like this: creation of these fields, and then that'll be like, say, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, how much ever your time you need to finish that task, putting that in the page layout, how much. So when you do it this way, you are not going to miss anything. So that's why you logically break them down into tasks, and you're even more near accurate, if I have to say, in your estimations, because you're thinking through every single thing that you need to do to attain this particular user story. So that's why that becomes very important too. So say now we have done the sprint planning. Now we know, okay, these are the list of stories that I'm going to deliver for the sprint as a team. So then once the sprint begins, we do something called as a daily stand-up or daily scrum. It's basically to inspect a progress towards your sprint goal, right? It's usually just 15 minutes meeting, nothing beyond that. And it happens every 24 hours. It's something done by the development team for the development team. And again, one thing I want to emphasize here, it's not a status meeting. So if you're a Scrum Master, don't go into the meeting and ask like, hey, Sudha, what did you do yesterday? Or what did you do today? It's rather than just, it's not a status meeting. It's for the team to come up and talk about if there are any risks or impediments, or if there's anything that they want from another person because there's a dependency or a user story and stuff like that, right? So it's only for us to discuss that. And always remember, in your Scrum, we're promoting self-managing teams, which is like heart of agility and Scrum, right? That's why I keep on saying it's not about assigning tasks. We're all self-managing. We know what we are good at, and we know what to pick and how to work on. And there's a mutual trust among all of us, right? So always remember that your daily Scrum should improve communication, transparency, identifying impediments, and also promote quick decision making. And like I mentioned earlier, don't wait for your daily Scrum. If you have risks or impediments, go to your Scrum Master as quickly as you can, so you're saving time there. The next ceremony is your sprint review, or some of you might call it sprint demo. It's basically to inspect the outcome of the sprint and determine the future adaptations. So this is the place where you will show what you have built during the sprint to your stakeholders or your product owner, and you're going to gather feedback, like how do they like it? Do they feel something needs to be different? Do they need to alter anything, right? So if some of those feedbacks come up, Always remember, there's no pressure that you need to incorporate that feedback in the same sprint, because you have to assess how much you can do in the same sprint, right? You just have a day to close your sprint, and you have received a lot of wonderful feedbacks. Add them as your user stories to the backlog and prioritize them for later sprints. The reason I say this is, if it's as simple as changing a field label name or your help text just in one page, it's okay. It might not have a major impact and you might be able to do it in the same sprint. But if there's anything that might be risky or complicated, in the sense that you might have to do a full testing again, or you might break something else which is already working fine, don't go and pick it up for the same sprint. It's always, everybody is aware of this, and it's a good practice to go and say like, hey, I have gathered all your feedback. This is all the list of feedbacks I've gathered. I've put it in my backlog. Let's go ahead and prioritize it in our next grooming session and see when we can accommodate this, right? So don't go and commit to anything during your sprint review. You're not expected to do that, and it's actually risky. And the final ceremony, now that let's assume that our sprint went well, everything was wonderful, and we have completed the sprint, and we are at the point of sprint retrospective, right? This is one of the very important ceremonies, which I say we should never skip. Don't skip any other ceremonies, but definitely not skip retrospective too. It's the meeting which is very important, because you plan ways to increase quality and effectiveness. Because we all do things differently, and we learn from how we are doing things. It could be good things, it could be mistakes, but we have to learn from them. So the Scrum team inspects how the last sprint went with regards to individuals. It could be with regards to tool, it could be with process, interactions, definition of that, anything, right? We talk through all this. We discuss through what went well, what could have gone better. And if something didn't go well, but we solved it in a good way, we want to talk about that too. How did we solve the problems, or how did we not solve the problems during the sprints, right? And it's again, one of the important things is, don't just document and leave it. We need to ensure all the improvements are addressed as soon as possible, because that's why we are even doing the sprint retrospective itself. So it's not just understanding what went well, what did not go well. We need to ensure if something went well, we are following it moving forward, because we know it really works for our team. And if something did not go well, we still take that as a learning, and we try to see how we can become better in that. It could be as simple as your Jira board being not used properly. It could be something with a dependency with another team which was not addressed correctly. It could be anything. It could be anything, right? But we need to ensure that there is a trust in the team, there is mutual respect. So everyone is free in communicating, and they're coming forward to tell you what went well and what did not go well. If there is no trust or mutual respect, then people are going to be hesitant, because we all feel we'll be judged, and we don't want to be judged. So, that's one of the core things that I always say. Transparency is very important, for which we all need to be like amicable and trusted, and we all respect each other. Cool. So moving forward, let's look at a quick tale when Salesforce as a company actually met Agile. So this is again a true story I learned a few years back, and there's also a trailhead on this. If you have not looked at it, go check that out. So the story goes like this. So imagine us heading to a Dreamforce. I know Shiva is going to share her Dreamforce experience today later with us, but imagine us heading to a Dreamforce and there are no keynotes, no new product announcement, no innovation features available for the next year. We can't even imagine that this happening to us today, right? But this almost happened to Salesforce in 2006. But they actually dodged that scenario by implementing a new workflow that changed the way they developed and delivered products. So by 2006, Salesforce had experienced phenomenal growth. They had more customers, more products, more revenue, and they were a much bigger company compared to when they started in 1999. And like we all know, any growth doesn't come pain-free. Things were not easier anymore, and there was slowdown in innovation, scaling communication, collaboration, and management, all while they were trying to meet release dates, became much more challenging. That is when Salesforce smartly took the risk and reinvented the way of delivering solutions by adopting agile principles and practices. So like we all know, most of the work Salesforce does is innovation based, right? They're constantly innovation. Innovation is like a powerhouse of Salesforce. We're constantly getting better and better. Our products become much better every single year. And the final outcome is always not known upfront. And Agile works like a charm in such cases, right? For most of these teams. While I say that, I also want you all to know that some teams still run on Waterfall, where outcomes are clearly known upfront. So like I said, no one size fits all. It's just that we need to look at the parameters and decide whether Waterfall might work or Agile might work. And when they adopted Agile, they were like 150 people. They were organized into small cross-functional teams working in short iterations. And now when we look back and now when we see, how much different our Salesforce is and how bigger and more innovation we see every year in Dreamforce, there is a small story behind it. So I thought it's more apt to share the story with you all today. All right, so now that we all looked at a little bit more basics around Agile and Scrum, I want to spend a good amount of time for us to discuss and talk through Salesforce user stories itself, right? How do we create good user stories, especially Salesforce stories? How do we estimate and prioritize them? This is what we are going to now move forward to. So this is again a general best practice and it's something that I had been following as well. They say that a good user story fits in something that's called as an INVEST criteria. The INVEST acronym stands for independent, negotiable, valuable, estimable, small, and testable. I'm going to take a moment and tell you what each of this means and why it's important. So the I in INVEST, which is independent, means the story should be independent as far as possible, because we are trying to deliver value to the customer sooner and faster, right? So the lesser the dependency, the faster it can go to market. Because if you have one story which is dependent on 5 other stories, imagine unless you implement all those 5, you cannot go in with the 6th, though it could be like big priority to your customer. So I'm not saying you will never have dependencies. I'm saying keep them minimal. Try to logically slice your stories to ensure they are independent as far as possible. The N in INVEST stands for negotiable. So what negotiable means is there should always be room for discussion on your user stories. It should never be like a dead end, right? There should always be room for negotiation. We should be able to discuss about it. We should be able to talk through it. We should be able to understand it like fully. So if a user story is totally not negotiable, it's like a dead end. It's like probably a caution for us that there's something not right about this, because we should always be able to have discussions. We should be able to think through the design, solutions, and whatnot, right? There should always be room for that discussion. V in INVEST stands for valuable. And if you remember what I said about even the lean thinking, which is one of the basics of Scrum, we're trying to eliminate waste, right? So if we only want to deliver value to the customer, if something is of no value to the customer, you don't want a user story for it. If we are looking at a user story and you feel like, okay, this is not at all adding value to my customer, you have to think whether you even need that user story in the first place. You don't even need it, because why do you waste your time and effort and build something which is of zero value to your customer, right? So whatever user stories we write should always be valuable. So E in INVEST stands for estimable. Again, like when we are writing user stories, when you're discussing through user stories, the team should be able to understand the user story well enough. They are the people who are going to build it, right? So there should always be very good understanding about the user story, what we are trying to achieve. And if you have any questions, and we want to ensure all that questions are answered, so that the team is able to go further and break them down into tasks and estimate them as well, right? So if you cannot estimate a story, then again, there is a problem with it, because that means your story is very vague. It's not clear. Your team is not understanding because they don't know what work and how much work is needed to achieve that. And S in INVEST stands for small. So again, keep your stories as small as possible because you again want to realize business value sooner and faster. If you have a very big user story, you're going to spend more time in it. There's more complexity to it. It's not going to hit the market sooner. So the smaller, the better. If you keep it like one objective per user story, don't combine too many things in one story. Because if you have 5 objectives in a story, say for example, your 4th is not achieved, your story is not done, right? Though you finished the remaining 4 objectives, right? So it's important that if you keep it as small as possible, you can still go and deliver that. They can still start working on it. Imagine like you're talking about, putting some fields, but also putting some validations and also driving a flow all in one user story. It's really bulkier, right? Because if you're not able to do the flow, at least if your fields and your validations are ready, that story can still be useful to your customer. So keep it as small as possible. And T in invest stands for testable. So again, whatever story that we are trying to write, it should have acceptance criteria, which are basically your testable statements. And someone should be able to go and test and say whether your user story works fine or not. It's like a clear pass or fail statements. If you can't test a story, it means you can't validate it. So there is no way to say the story works fine. Again, it's a caution, right? Unless it's like a purely a technical story or a spike story that we call it, while you're trying to do a POC, like a prototype for something that's coming up very complex. You don't know whether it's possible in Salesforce, how complex is the design. So you want to do a small POC. That's like purely technical story that might not need to be tested all the time, right? Because you're just building some POCs. It's not delivered to the customer in that sprint. But ideally, any story that we write should be testable as well. So here are like 3 main parts of a user story. So every user story has a summary, it has a description, and the third is the acceptance criteria. So a summary in a user story is usually a very crisp statement, right? It's again a tip that I follow in my projects. You can follow it if you're okay, if your project is okay. If otherwise they have a different standard, feel free to follow that. So what I kind of do is, this again applies for your user story or your feature, basically for any product backlog item, this can be used. So summary is something like a name, right? How do I differentiate this user story from another user story? This is not your value statement, or this is not what you're testing against. It's usually for differentiating one story from the other. So what I kind of do is I keep like a feature name shortened, and then I put a story summary. So I want to give you a Salesforce specific example here. And let's see how do we write stories for it. Say, for example, I'm working with a financial services, like a banking client, and they tell me that they have no way to capture account levels today. Like they have different levels like platinum, bronze, gold, silver with their customers. And they don't have the ability to track that today. And so they want to have this particular whatever way that we try to design, whichever is the best solution, but they want a way to know which account level the customer belongs to, right? If that's the problem statement I'm trying to solve, then if I'm writing a story for it, probably I'm going to call it like, assuming that I already have a feature for account management, I might just say ACCT MGMT, shortened version of an account management within square brackets, and I'll just say ability to capture account levels, right? It's keep it crisp, keep it shorter. The shorter, the better. And like I said, this is only going to be a differentiator for one story from the other. Moving on to the description, which is again a very vital part of your user story, because this is the value statement. This is the place where you will come to know what's the value the story is adding at all, right? Sorry, so what value is it bringing to the customer? So it usually has 3 essential parts. Usually your story will start like, as what user? Basically, you're trying to say the persona. I want to perform what action so that I get what benefit, right? So there's a persona part, there's a what part, and there's a why part. So it tells you who is the target person for this story, what is the action that the person is trying to perform, and why do we need to perform that action, right? Again, keep this description simple and concise. You don't want to add any information that is not important. We try to keep only relevant information in. So focus only on what is important. So I'm going to take the same example, and then I'm going to talk through how I would write description, right? So we say we're again capturing account levels for the customers. So I would go ahead writing as an account executive, assuming the account executive is a persona that we're talking about who should have the ability to capture. So as an account executive, I want the ability to capture the level which my account belongs to. That's the action, right? So that what is the benefit? I can understand the relationship level with my customer. So every time I have a conversation with my customer, I know what packages to tell him, what discounts I should talk about, and also like what privileges the customer has. So I want to know all that. And another piece of relevant information that could be useful for the story is knowing what are the different account levels, because whatever you're using to configure, it could be a pick list value, you could do any different ways of achieving this, but what are the different levels? So it's bronze, silver, gold, platinum, then I need to ensure that I have all that listed, right? So that becomes my description. Now let's move on to acceptance criteria, which is again another core piece of your user story. These are the set of conditions that needs to be fulfilled, right? So these become your testable statements for your whoever is going to validate your user stories. They're going to test against each of these statements and say whether this user story works or not. Again, a tip from me is keep 3 to 5 acceptance criteria for a story. Do not do more, because that is an indication that your story is getting bulkier. You may want to then slice it up into smaller user stories. And another tip that I use, I use my acceptance criteria with 3 parts, very similar to your user story description. I have a given. Basically, I talk about the initial condition and then the action itself, when, and then what is the result that I'm trying to achieve. Again, going back to our use case, I can say that given that I am an account executive, which means I'm logging in as an account executive to test this, right? So given that I'm an account executive, when I view my customer information, which is the action that you're carrying out, what is the result expected? I should be able to view the account levels pertaining to my customer. So that could be one of my acceptance criteria. I could add another acceptance criteria because I only talked about viewing. Should I be able to update it, right? If, for example, I have upgraded my customer from gold to platinum, I want to update it, right? So then I put another acceptance criteria saying, given that I'm an account executive, when I modify my customer information, I should be able to update the account level pertaining to my customer. If I have to add a little bit more complexity for another acceptance criteria, say I want to be able to only update my accounts and not your accounts, basically the account only which I own and not any other account, then I can add another acceptance criteria saying, given that I'm an account executive and not the owner of the account, then I should not be able to update the account levels on my customer information, right? So if you understand, so these are the different testable statements, and that becomes your acceptance criteria. So unless all of these conditions are fulfilled, my story is not even ready, right? It means there is some bug or there's something that's not working fine. So this is where all that gets taken care of. So now that I've explained a little bit about the summary, description, and the acceptance criteria, can you all tell me from your Salesforce experience or any other general experience that you have in the technology space, say, for example, you're trying to capture a new information for your customer, right? In Salesforce terms, if I have to say, new field, what are the information that you would like as a developer or a tester or anybody part of the Scrum team to be included as part of your description? What are the things that you would look for? Can you go ahead and pop that in your chat? Greg says, what users should have the access to the field? Amazing. Why the field is useful? Login as. Data type. Thank you, Parvati. Anything else that you look for? business process, data type, user access, field. There was any pick list. Amazing. Yeah, you all pretty much covered. Reportable. Yes, Shiva, thank you. Yeah, you all pretty much covered everything. Let me try to summarize with a little bit more information. Probably if it's like you're capturing a new information, you're trying to look at the field label. What are you even going to call this new information, piece of information as, right? And then the field type and the position of the field. Where do you put this field, in which page, under which section, all that cool stuff. The screen and page layout, if you want to know more about that. And then whether this field is going to be like a required field, is it a read-only field, editable field, the usual FLS that you need to take care of. And if this was a little bit more complex stories, like I was saying earlier, if this information is either coming from a different system to Salesforce, or it's going from Salesforce to some other system, then probably that might get into another user story because that's totally different objective. But that also might come up while you're discussing these user stories and while you're going through these different details on your description of your user story. Awesome. Thank you so much for that. Let's look at another scenario. Imagine this story is about some kind of business process or workflow, not necessarily in Salesforce terms workflow, but anything like, you're trying to build a workflow for your customer. It could be on case management. It could be on any sales process. You're trying to build a business process. Then what are the key things that you would need to be part of the description for you to have enough information to go and build this user story? Title, object, criteria, action, who is going to use the process, the campaign, anything else that comes on top of your mind? Think about any business process, like pick a case process or opportunity process. Is it scheduled or it's going to be triggered? If there is an API name, the approver, oh, that's excellent, thank you. Process type, user. All right, amazing. So yeah, like just to add to what you all mentioned so far, we would look for all the different things, right? Like success pattern, the failure pattern, what all triggers this particular business process or the flow itself, right? Do we need to handle any exceptions for this particular business process or flow? If there are any exceptions, how do we handle the exception handling? What are the actions needed once this process gets triggered? What are all the different actions it goes through, right? And again, if it's a bigger process flow or a bigger flow, we might need to break them down into smaller stories so we are still able to keep delivering pieces of it sooner and faster. And the final scenario, and I think Parvati already answered this for my earlier question, but this one is for the approval process. Again, assume that this story is about approving expenses. You're building an expense report and you're trying to build an approval process for this. That's about the story. What are all the key details that you would look for in this particular story? What all you would need to build this particular story? Approver, process type, user, who all needs to be included in the approval and rejection. Who approves the instance? Thank you, Ben. Organizational hierarchical approver. Cool. Tasks, email templates. Perfect. Anything else that you can all think of? All right, so again, you all made my life easier because you're all giving the right inputs. So just to summarize, so all scenarios that might trigger the approval process. So we'll start from there because we need to know what's the triggering place for this approval and how is it expected to work, right? Like it could be a single level approval, it could be multi-level approval. You could have delegated approvals. Like if someone is out of office, you want to assign delegate and then there's a delegated approval there. how are these people even being notified? Like Shiba was saying, it could be email notifications, or you may want to just notify them on Salesforce because people don't like too many emails. It could be different reasons for different scenarios, right? The SLA for approval. So how are we going to handle the SLA? If something doesn't get approved like in 48 hours, are we going to auto approve it, or what are we going to do? Again, for rejection scenario as well, if we need to take care of that, like are we capturing rejection reason, why it's being rejected, then what's the flow for that, which might be, again, your separate user story for rejection process. And yeah, pretty much all these information you would look for when you're grooming the story. So mostly what happens is when these stories come in for grooming and the product owner discusses with us, like all the developers team, then we will start asking all these questions, and they all become key details that you're needing for the particular user story. And like I mentioned earlier, if something is not very important, not pertinent for this particular user story, just don't go and add it, because you only want to keep relevant information for the user story. You don't want anything unnecessary there. So this is another thing that I want to share, again, from my experience. And I feel these are the common user story pitfalls that we all fall into, including me. And I feel that we should avoid these definitely when you're writing stories. So I want you all to take a moment to read this user story on the screen now. I will read it loud, but just take a moment to read the story yourselves. So as a Salesforce user, I want the ability to click on a button, products by family, to filter products based on product family and report on products by family, so that I can quickly search and report on products. So we have three parts here. We are talking about the persona, we are talking about the action, we are talking about the benefit, right? The framework of your user story. So is anything in this user story that you feel can become better, or do you think it is alarming? You feel like, hey, this is not how we should write the user story, so that this is not correct, or you feel like this user story is perfect. First of all, let me know if you feel this user story is good, or you feel there is room for improvement. Give me a thumbs up or thumbs down if that's easier than typing. I just want to know if any of you feel this is correct, or you feel there is room for improvement. Can improve in the action part. Thanks, Shanti. Do any of you feel the story is good? It's like totally good. It's fine. Okay, good. I don't think any of you feel the story is good, which is good. So, but let's. I hear Meena say need improvement. What kind of button are we looking for? Okay, I'll give a few more minutes if any of you are typing. Go ahead. I mean, there is no honestly right or wrong answers. I think we're all learning. It's different perspectives. Every time I do this session, I also learn a lot myself. So feel free to go ahead and say what you think about this particular story. Brandon says more specific type of user. Perfect. Can improve the type of user. Break the story in two parts for search and report. Awesome. Object names missing. It's a bit complex, multiple actions. Perfect. I think we've covered pretty much. So I'm going to tell you what I feel is alarming here first and foremost. The who, the persona of this user story, if you see here, it is very generic, right? It should ideally be a proper persona, a proper role, right? Because when I say Salesforce user, it could mean a marketing executive to me. It could mean a sales representative to Shiba. It could mean every user to someone else. It can mean actually every user, right? Because everybody is a Salesforce user. So the persona here itself is a problem because we are keeping it very generic, and it should not be generic. So always remember, whenever you're creating a user story, the who should be a role, it should not be a generic one. The second one, I see there is room for improvement and a little bit alarming is, we are saying, I want the ability to click on a button, right? So if you, what is the problem here? I'm just saying put a button and I want to click on a button, right? The problem here is I am solutioning it as a product owner. I might not be a Salesforce technical expert, and there are definitely rooms for me where I'll not know enough about the technical pieces of it. But I'm coolly going and writing that, as a Salesforce user, I want the ability to click on a button, products by product family, to filter products based on product family, right? So always remember, a story should be written from an end user's perspective. So put yourselves in the user's shoes. We should always communicate the problem to solve, not the solution to deliver. And I'm going to talk about why it is so important, because the experts, the technical experts, are the people who are your developers, right? So you will have architect skill set, you will have developer skill set, you have designer skill set, different skill set as part of your team. They are the actual people who knows how the landscape is, how Salesforce is, how the platform is built for your customer, and how things are working. So I might think it's a button, but it could be a search filter, which is out of the box, and you could leverage it. Or it could be totally something else, because probably there is more flows or more things that are driven based on the products by product family, right? We never know. So, but as a product owner, the moment I say click on a button, the developer team is going to definitely go ahead and put a button there, most likely, right? Because if I'm a developer and I read this user story, I might think, okay, the user wants a button out there where they can click and filter products by product family. So basically what I'm restricting is, I'm restricting the creativity in the team. So we should always allow the creativity to flow in the team. And like I mentioned, like when we were talking about the invest criteria, the negotiable, and how we should have a conversation about the story itself, that should happen here. We should always allow conversation before implementing a solution. Let the teams talk to each other and come up with the right solution. Let them decide whether it's a button or a search filter or something else. The third thing that alarms me here is, like some of you rightly mentioned, we're talking about two different objectives, right? One, we are saying I want to search by product family. Two, I'm also saying I want to report by product family. I can potentially split this into two different stories so I can realize business value sooner and faster. Maybe like the first sprint, I'm able to only deliver searching products by product family, but it's like super critical for the customer. It's more priority, but they still get it. If I'm not able to build a report, then it means the story is on, basically I'm holding the story, right? I'm not able to deliver it fully. So like I mentioned earlier, it's always good to split your stories as small as possible to realize business value sooner and faster. The next thing that alarms me here is we have a term called quickly, right? Quickly is such a relative term. It can mean different to different people. Quickly searching could mean 10 seconds to me. It could mean 3 seconds to Shiva. It could mean 20 seconds to Brandon. It could mean 30 to someone else. So we are not saying in a very measurable way here, and we should always keep user story measurable and avoid these kind of terms that we use relatively. So how can I use this story better? So this is how I have split the story into two, just because there are two different objectives. And let's read it now and see if it makes more sense, right? As a sales representative, now we have a very clear role mentioned here. The persona is pretty clear. It's no longer generic, so it's good. I want the ability to search products by products family. All right, so even the action is very clear, and I'm not solutioning. I'm only saying I need to search products by product family because I have a very huge product catalog and I need an efficient way to search it, right? So that I can filter my products in less than 40 seconds. Now see how measurable the story has become. So even when you're testing the story, you need to ensure that the search results come in less than 40 seconds, then it means it's a thumbs up, right? So now the story reads much more clearer from an objective, and it's more easier to understand the exact thing that we want. And the developer team can go ahead and solution later based on how they feel, what is the best way to do it, right? And we have a second user story just for reporting. Again, a very clear persona as a sales rep. I want the ability to report on products by product family so that I can review my products by family, right? So if you look at this is that, again, a common pitfalls that we all fall into and we should avoid while we create user stories. And before we move on to estimation and prioritization, a quick user story example here, assuming that we are capturing regions for our opportunities, then you can have a summary saying sales process, which is your feature, and then a quick summary, a crisp statement capturing regions and opportunities. And you could have a description which has all the clear parts stated, your persona, your action, and the benefit. As a sales rep, I want the ability to capture the region on my opportunities so that I can view and manage my opportunities by region, right? So, and then we have different regions mentioned here because, again, that's a very relevant piece of information for your user stories. Whether you decide it's going to be pick list or not, whatever, again, leave it to your technical solution. But these are all the different regions that I need to take care of. And like acceptance criteria here, we have two possible. You could have more if there's more complexity than two. But here I'm just saying that one for view and one for update. So given that I'm a sales rep and I view my opportunities, I should be able to see the region to which my opportunity belongs to. And given that I'm a sales rep, when I edit my opportunities, I should be able to update the region on them, right? Again, like I said, if there's more complexity, you would have more acceptance criteria, like if this region has to go into something else, if there is anything beyond that, then they all become your separate user stories as well. So now that we know how to create good user stories, the next few minutes I want to spend on the user story prioritization and estimation, right? So always it happens to us that we have a lot of user stories in our product backlog. Sometimes it could be 300, 500, because we're constantly gathering the requirements from the customers and we're creating them as stories. How do we know what needs to go in first and what needs to go in next? That's where prioritization comes into play, right? So while you're refining your backlog, while you're doing this exercise, you also do something that's prioritization, right? So you need to understand from your stakeholders and customers, what is that minimum viable product that you need? What's that bare minimum that you cannot live without? This is a minimum I need for me to go into market, right? So how do we even arrive at that? Again, there is this thing that a lot of people use called Moscow analysis. It stands for must have, should have, could have, or won't have, right? So imagine this being like 4 buckets in front of you. You need to take each of your user stories and drop into one of them, right? So that's what we're going to try to do. How do we do this? How do I know whether the story is a must have or a should have or a could have or won't have, right? So we take few things into considerations. The first and foremost is a business value. How much value is this user story or a feature to your customer? Is it like super critical? It's very high. It's like, okay value. Like it's not like very important. I can live without it. It can come in later. So what it is, right? Second thing we look at is any dependencies that we might have. Do we have any dependencies with another product backlog item? Like I said, we're going to keep them as independent as possible, but let's face the reality, right? Sometimes we do have dependencies. So we need to consider that as well. And then other 2 things that we will consider are the solution approach and the risks, right? A solution approach could be like any prerequisites, dependencies that you need to take care of. Like imagine if this is like a fresh, brand new Salesforce implementation. Your customer has never implemented Salesforce before. And the same customer, the customer service optimization that we were trying to do, the case management was our #1 priority. Our knowledge base was #2, and implementing a collaborative channel was #3 priority. But you know what? While we're grooming this, we tell the customers that we need to have an org setup or a basic thing to be set up before we implement anything on top of it. And we need to add a feature for that to ensure that our Salesforce org is set up correctly. Like all the minimal pieces are taken care of. We know what are the different personas we need to bring into Salesforce, what are all the roles, profiles, all those cool things that we need to set up first before we start building anything on top of it. So we educate the customer, and suddenly now, if you notice, something that was not in the priority jumps into number one priority, because though it doesn't directly add value from a functionality perspective for the customer, it's going to add value through every other functionality that we are building, because this is going to be the base for us. Like it could be a role hierarchy, it could be just setting up your profiles and permissions, setting up your org. So all these needs to be considered as well when you're doing prioritization. So now that we understand and we consider all this, say I pick up a user story. Now I need to decide which bucket it's going into. Say, for example, this story is like absolutely essential for the customer. It's of very high business value. It's totally a non-negotiable item. They don't even want to talk about whether it's going in or not. It has to go in. And it's very critical for the success, right? Then in this case, it's very evident that this story is a must-have, because it's like super critical, non-negotiable, it's very much needed. So I drop this in the must-have bucket. I pick another story. Now this story, it's important, but not absolutely essential. It's still like high business value, and it is very much important, but it's not like that super critical one, right? Then that means this story I'm going to drop into the should have bucket. Say I'm picking up a next story, and this story is more like a nice to have story. It does have value, it is desirable, but it's not like I cannot live without it, right? It's a desirable feature. So for example, this could be something like a story which you're trying to put help text on. You can live without it because reading it, people will still understand, but a help text will just make it much more easier, for example, right? So then it's like more desirable. Then that could go into your could have bucket. And say I pick another user story, and this story is not so important for a particular release, and we can completely wait, right? It can be implemented later. It is not like super critical for this release. Then I'm like, okay, then I don't need to focus on this now. This is like won't have for this release. I wouldn't have it for this release, but who knows, next release, when we're again prioritizing things, this might jump up, right? But for this release, it doesn't make sense. So I'm going to put it in won't have bucket. So that's how we would do the prioritizations of user stories, or even it could be done for features if you're even doing at a feature level. Finally, let's talk a little bit about user story estimation, right? So again, I want to emphasize that I'm only talking about the user story estimation, not the task estimation. We touched upon task estimation briefly while we were going through the sprint planning and all that stuff. But again, this one is very specific for your user story estimation. And you would be hearing these terms in your projects like USP, 3 USP, 5 USP, 1 USP. So USP stands for user story points. And how do we size a user story, right? Like we know what we need to achieve in a story. We have all our questions answered from the product owner. How do you go sizing them? So this is something, again, it's a very debatable topic. So I know some customers, I work for some projects where they don't do estimations at all. I have worked for several projects where they do estimations. So it's, again, like I said, no one size fits all. We have different parameters to look at which one we want to go over. But let's look at the majority of the plays, right? So we do something called as relative sizing. So if I ask, or if you ask me to size something, I would, if you say like, so that you have to make Astro block today, how much time would you take? I would not really know how much time it would take. I might think, and I might tell you like, you know what, to build this Astro Lego block, I think it might take 5 hours, right? Say, for example, you come and tell me, so that you remember you built a mini block last time during our last meeting. Now, to build this Lego block today, which is different, which is bigger, how much time you think you will take in relation to that building that mini block? Now I get much more clarity, because I know I had built this mini block, like say in 2 hours. And now I know how much I have to build this for, right? I know this is probably like 2 times, 3 times more complex than the mini block, because there are more blocks and it's a bigger. And I look at different parameters, and now I say like, you know what, I don't think I will need 5 hours. I think I'm probably able to finish this in 4 hours. So now it's become suddenly easier for me to size, because I'm doing something called as a relative sizing, right? So what we do is we pick up the smallest work that we have ever done as a team, as our base thing. And then we try to relatively size the user stories based on that particular base stories. And one thing to remember is always pick a base story that you have built as a team. Don't pick something from another team or from someone else. It should be something that you have built as a team earlier. So there are a few considerations we do, like very similar how we did for prioritization. There are some considerations we need to take care of. One is the complexity. So is the complexity higher, bigger, or smaller in relation to my mini block, if that's the smallest ever I have done, right? We try to look at the functional and the technical complexity, and then we look at magnitude of work. Again, this one I just want to spend like 1 minute to talk a little bit about why magnitude of work and not the hours. So while you're doing story point estimation, and again, this is a big misconception, a lot of people start thinking about how much hours or minutes I need to do this particular story. Don't consider that. And I'm going to tell you why not to. Always consider the magnitude of work. How much bigger or smaller the effort is going to be in comparison to my mini block in my example to build this big Lego block, right? The reason why I should not consider time is because at the time of story point estimation, it's done before your sprint planning, while you're grooming and refining your stories. At this point, you don't know who is going to build what, right? So what happens when you consider time is that if, say, for example, I am a junior developer, I don't have super good skill sets in development yet in Salesforce. So I might take to develop something, say 3 hours. But Sheba is an expert. She has all the technical expertise. She's a very senior developer. She has worked in this platform and the system a long time. For her, it could only take an hour, which could take 3 hours for me. So if you look at it, what I'm trying to tell you is the time, it's the ideal time for the ideal person, right? It's it's relative. And that's exactly why we don't do that while you're doing story points, because at this time, you don't know who is going to work on a user story. So we try to consider the magnitude of work. So in comparison to my mini block, is my magnitude of work bigger, twice bigger, or it's like very big or small, right? And we also consider things like any risks involved, any dependencies, any uncertainties. Am I waiting for another user story to be complete to be working on this? Do I have a dependency with an integration team? Do I need to work for them to give me their API for me to build something on top of that API? Stuff like that. All that needs to be considered. And when you consider all this and you know your thing, then what you do is during your estimation session, again, you can use different things, like people use planning poker, people use cards in the room, depends on where you are and how your system works. And each of us will come up and say, this is what I feel as a story point. This is done independently and individually. And once everyone has done the sizing, we kind of flip our cards if we are in the same room, or if you're using planning poker, you will know like who is saying what, right? So we will say like, okay, this is one story point. Say, for example, I say, and Shiba feels this is 3 story points. Then we try to discuss through it and say like, hey, Shiba, you're saying 3 story points. Why do you think it is 3? What is your perspective? And she might tell me like, you know what, Sudha, you might think it's the same type of mini block, but I think this one has a much more complexity to it. It's not as straightforward as your mini block. This has much more smaller pieces that you may need to include. So then I'm like, oh, well, I didn't know that. Thank you. And then we might want to do the resizing, and then we'll arrive at a consensus, right? So that's how this exercise happens. And the values, usually people use Fibonacci series, which is like 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. I generally say don't go beyond 8 story points. It means your story is bigger, slice it into smaller stories. Again, it's just my tip. It could be different for different organizations. And if you're in very primitive stage, people also use something called as t-shirt sizing, like you say X's, S, medium, large, XL, and so on, right?
Sudha, there's a time check. I think we are over time, but you can like take 5 minutes if you want to
Yes, this is my last slide, Shiba. There'll be just 1 minute and I'm done.
And can you make me the co-host?
Yes, I'll do that. So just to move on, this is like quick tips before I wind up the session for your estimation. Always understand the user story fully. Don't think that you may not work on it. You never know who's going to work on it when you're estimating. Understand the user story fully. Ask questions. Don't be shy. And identify your base stories. Always remember, base story is something that your team has worked on. It's not something from another team or totally from a different project. It's something that should be that you have worked on and you know for sure what as the base is. Relatively size your other stories in the backlog in relationship to your base stories. And always remember to reach consensus among team. Don't go with the smallest number or the highest number. Definitely not average it out. Golden rule, don't do any of this. Always hear different perspective and arrive at consensus. And if your user story is bigger, greater than 8 story point, then break them down into smaller stories. And here's a quick visualization to let you know from a Salesforce terminology, Salesforce Vault, how your user stories might feel bigger to you, right? A field label change, if that's your base, which is the smallest, your field creation could be definitely a bit more bigger than that. And your field creation, if it involves integration system, that in field label change comparison is definitely much more bigger. And if it's like a multi-step approval process, if you compare that to a field label change, it's really big, right? So it's just a way to visualize on how things could change as we are doing estimations. All right, and I'm opening up for questions, and I will make Shiva the co-host.
Thanks so much, Sudha. It was just amazing. And I really liked it, especially because I'm in the midst of it. And also I feel today we were very agile. So we changed our plan incrementally and iteratively.
True, it's so true. And but thank you everyone for patiently listening and being such a supportive audience and sharing your different perspectives to us. And I thoroughly enjoyed this session. And thank you so much, Shiva, for having me. I'm going to stop sharing so you can share your screen.
So thank you, everyone. Today, like I said, we had to be a little agile in our methodology to handle the new thing that we had to do. So I hope this was helpful. I'll share my slide deck. Can you see it?
Yes, I can see it.
Perfect. So yeah, and I'll move along from here. 1 second. So yeah, that's me, Shiva Tukral. I'm the host of this meeting. And please feel free to contact me and stay in touch with me. I'll post the links in the chat window. And then just after I'm done with this, and then this is our user group. It's present in YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, and we have over 200 subscribers thanks to great presenters like Sudha. We have grown in popularity and stay connected to our group through those channels. We are a part of, we are a part of CGL, that is Community Group Leaders Advisory Board, and also participated in Dreamforce 21. The session was about the common use cases of flows in companies. So I, along with another presenter, Pressy, were given the opportunity to present. It was a good experience. And this is a little recap. I will try to open. So this one, just share a few photos. This is some pictures of, you're able to see, right? Give me a thumbs up.
Yes, Shiva.
Good, great. So we were able to present, it was in the Astro Trailblazer Community Campfire. And this was Foo Fighters that ended the Dreamforce session. Some pictures with other, so Golden Hoodie winners and some, Terry's Tidbits, some MVPs. And we had this nice bridge where we could pose the Trailblazers. So me and my husband were invited, so we enjoyed there. Again, with David Liu and Stephanie Herrera. And so the mascots, Cody, Astro, and this time Ruth was there, did a lot of amusing things, including doing headstands on the stage. Lionel Richie, who presents for very elite and specific audience, performed for this particular audience. And I loved Shoes of Mark Pennyhoff, and it was great. And Aloha celebration and inauguration by this Hawaiian couple was amazing, very mesmerizing. Golden Hoodie winners. And yeah, this was when we came in for this was a swag and some Trailblazer shots, and with Jennifer Snyder, marketing champion. And so this is a little photo recap that I have. And then, of course, if you want to share any updates of your own, please feel free to link to post it in the chat. And we have a new Slack channel, which is awesome admin Tiki Room, which I started in Dreamforce. You're free to join. I'm planning to appear for advanced admin certification. And if anybody wants to study with me, and we can form a group, do some focus on 4 studies together. If you like that idea, please join us there, and we can share other resources and topics, like, for instance, what I should do in these user group meetings. Some ideas can flow in. I welcome all ideas. And now we can start this quiz on Dreamforce. Is everyone ready? So you can use this QR code to join in the thing. Are you able to join in? So I can give you the code. You go to this URL, joinmyquiz.com, or you can use this scan this QR code to join in, and I can give you the code. So I need some interaction from you all. Give me a thumbs up. Maybe open your windows now, right? Are you able to join? Shanti is able to join. I get some response. And Greg, right here. Sorry, 1 second. I'm trying to get the code. Right. I can write it down in the chat, the code. Or you can just write it. It's 722377. Were you able to get it? 722377. And I'm starting it now. Is everyone ready? I see people joining in. I give a few more seconds before I hit the start. Is everyone in? Yeah, I see one. I want everyone to join. And if there's any requirement for some more time, let me know. Is everyone in? Also, let me share screen of that quiz also. So I'll stop share, reshare. Do you see my screen?
No, not
Not yet.
yet, Shiva.
All right. Do you see now?
Yes,
Perfect.
but we
All
just
right.
see your desktop, not anything shared on it.
Oh, okay. You see now?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, perfect. So is everyone in? It looks like everyone is in, right? Yep. Let's start now. Brandon is leading, then close second. All right, is it done? I think it should be done. I'll end it. Right. So this is Brandon was the winner. Do you see? Who's Brandon?
That's me.
Let me check.
That was fun. I've never seen that version of the quiz before.
I made it. Oh, congratulations, Brandon. Well deserved.
Thank you.
Hard quiz too, I would say.
Mm.
Yeah, that's good. So congratulations, you're the winner of the $25 gift certificate from Trailhead Store. And congratulations. Enjoy.
Thank you.
Happy Saturday morning, right? So yeah, that was it. And then I would like to say, join us in the, I would stop share. Join us for the Slack channel. I can give you the QR code. So do you have the, one second, I lost my slide. Yeah, here. Not yet. You're not saying thank you yet. So join our Slack channel by using this QR code, right?
Not sharing the screen yet.
Oh, 1 minute. I'm still getting used to my Apple computer. How many people feel it's real? Like you need to really adapt your from Windows to Apple knowledge. So 1 second. I would choose. I don't think.
Yes.
You're seeing the wrong screen though, right?
We can see the slide. Just can you make it bigger? That's all.
This one, do you see?
Yeah,
The
just make it
QR
bigger. Just click on the slide to make it bigger. That's all.
Slide to make it bigger. You can't see the QR code?
No, it's
You're
pretty
able
small.
to scan it, right? Can you try?
Can I just present, I believe? This is showing the speaker notes, audience.
Oh yeah, you have the wrong. 1 second. You have the wrong screen. It keeps disappearing on me. Right. Do you see it? But you see only the desktop. And now can you see it? All right, perfect. Can you see this QR code enough to scan it and join the Slack channel?
Yes.
Perfect, right? So let's stay connected through Slack. Also, please feel free to give us ideas, and together we can improve just in an agile way that Sudha just taught us incrementally, and continuous improvement should be the goal. Perfection is great, but I think it's a continuous improvement that we're looking at. So yeah, thanks so much, Sudha. It was just amazing. I think this is such a great methodology for implementing projects, and that's why I thought of this topic. And yeah, so I think it's time. I'm giving back 10 minutes of your time. So we'll also be sharing the recording on YouTube, and feel free to revisit us and join the channel, and keep connected on Slack, send recommendations of ideas for new topics or speakers, or if you would like to speak, because I want to start a new segment where fresh speakers are given a chance to present. So for continuous improvement, right? So, all right. So thanks very much, everyone. Have a great rest of the Saturday, and bye for now.
Thank you, Shiba. Thank you so much for hosting me. And it's a pleasure being here, and it's wonderful participation. So thank you so much.
Thanks very much. I'll end the meeting now and stop share. And bye to all. Have a great rest of the weekend.